y dos, y dos, una, y dos, una, y dos.
Hello and welcome to Cortes NYC Livestream, the podcast. This show broadcasts twice a week out of New York City. We are your hosts, Cortes NYC
and Carla de Puerto Rico.
And on the show, we talk about art, creativity, city life from a Latino perspective. I'm a visual artist.
And I'm a singer.
And this is episode 56.
As always, you can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Podbean, and Spotify, and also on social media on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Tumblr.
And don't forget my online store, cortesnyc.bigcartel.com. There I have things for sale. I have original art, I have graffiti pins, I have stickers, I have posters. So please log on and help support your favorite artists.
And a shout out to all our listeners, our new listeners, and our old listeners. Thank you for listening and for tuning in. From what countries do we have
got listeners from United States, United Kingdom, Sweden, Spain,
What?
Trinidad and Tobago, Germany, Switzerland, Canada, and some listener from Australia.
Wow.
Cheers, mate from Australia.
So thank you for listening and stay tuned.
And let's do this. Continuing the museum tour. The Frick Collection. All right, the Frick Collection. Are you ready for this?
Sounds freaky.
Is this the part 3 of our tour here?
Yeah.
All right, so it's the third museum we're reviewing. The Frick Collection, well, for you guys that are following this podcast, you probably have already listened to the other two, but I've been on this little kick of reviewing some of my favorite pieces from some of my favorite museums in the New York area. So far, they've all been art museums.
Yeah.
But I'm sure I'll throw a couple of different types of museums in there as well. But for now, we're going to keep going with this art theme.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to talk about the Frick Museum. The Frick Collection, it's called. Carla, do you know the Frick Collection?
Yes, actually, I do.
Have you gone?
I went as part of a school tour.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, it was an art. So it was like an art history class, and we went there.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. It's a really cool museum. Very like exclusive, selected pieces that they have there.
I don't think it's as popular or as known as some of the other museums.
Yeah, no, not really.
But I think people should know more about it. I remember, I think my son, I wanted to take him to it, and I took him to it one time, and then he kind of expressed to me that it was not as fun as the other museums. I think the reason for it is because it really is just painting, sculpture, and furniture.
Yeah.
It's a private collection. It's open to the public, but it started as a private collection, and it's run as if it was a private collection. So that's why it's called the Frick Collection. And it's kind of like a narrow style of art. It's not, they don't have like modern art. They don't have like abstract art or anything like that.
No, it's a specific
time
style.
period. Yeah, in a specific style. So I think that's the reason why maybe it's not as known, or maybe it doesn't get the attention that some of the other museums might be getting. But here, I'll tell you a little bit of a story about it. So the Frick Collection is an art museum located at the Henry Clay Frick House on the Upper East Side in Manhattan. So this is something I kind of knew before, but I wasn't 100% sure of. But the Frick Collection is actually, it was the house that these people lived in. So this they call it a house. We would call it a mansion.
Exactly.
Especially in Manhattan. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that puts a whole other perspective on this museum, because
Yeah, when
you think about who the hell lived in this freaking mansion. Like,
when you go in, you feel like you're entering somebody's house and somebody's home, and it's also because of the way that it's decorated.
It's a decoration
because it still feels like somebody lives there.
So this is on the Upper East Side, New York City, at 1 East 70th Street. It's right near the Met, so that's why I always I've gone there a few times, and I've always been attracted to it is because it's right there. I can go to the Met and then go to the Frick or vice versa.
Yeah.
It houses the collection of industrialist Henry Clay Frick. So that was the guy who started the whole thing.
Okay.
Henry Clay Frick. And then his years here are 1849 to 1919. The museum was established in 1935. So he died in 1919. Let's say 1920, let's round it out.
Yeah.
So 15 years later, it was established as the Frick Collection Museum. The history. Henry Frick started, and I'm going to say this carefully. Henry Frick started his substantial art collection as soon as he started amassing his fortunes. A considerable amount of his art collection is located in his former residence, Clayton, in Pittsburgh, which is today part of the Frick Art and Historical Center. Another part was given by his daughter and heiress, Helen, to the Frick Fine Arts Building, which is on the campus of the University of Pittsburgh. The family did not permanently move from Pittsburgh to New York until 1905. Henry Frick initially leased the Vanderbilt House at 640 Fifth Avenue, to which he moved substantial amount of his collection. He had his permanent residence built between 1912 and 1914 by Thomas Hastings of whatever, I don't know, some career in Hastings architecture firm or whatever. He stayed in the house until his death in 1919. He willed the house. This is an interesting part. He died, right? And then he willed the house and all of its contents, including art, furniture, and decorative objects, as a public museum. So he put it in his will that he wanted this to be a museum.
That's amazing.
That's interesting. And I don't know how many times you hear, I don't know if we have rich people like that anymore who do things like this.
To be like, I just wanted it to be a museum, but still, you know how like, they have to be making a fortune now.
Of course.
So still, it's not, you know, like you're wasting.
Right. It's not charity.
Yeah.
It's still a business. It's a foundation or whatever.
Exactly, like a foundation.
But it's interesting that he really did this towards the end of his life.
And put thought to it.
Exactly.
To think, I want this to be a museum.
Yep. So he willed the house and all of its contents, including art, furniture, and decorative objects, as a public museum. His widow, Adelaide Howard Childs Frick, however, retained the right of residence and continued living in the mansion with her daughter Helen.
Oh, wow.
So she stayed there against his will, literally. After Adelaide Frick died in 1931, so this is...
That's why it took so long.
Exactly. So after like another 12 years, I guess. I'm messing up the math. Then she died, and then the conversion of the house into a public museum started. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
And that he had established a lot of his collection before he died is interesting. So I'll just keep going real quick. John Russell Pope altered and enlarged the building in the early 1930s. So they began to expand the building, make it bigger. So maybe it wasn't as big as what we see right now.
Yeah.
But it's still pretty damn big.
Yeah.
Enlarged the building in the early 1930s to adapt it to use as a public institution. It opened to the public on December 16, 1935. Various additions to the architecture and landscape architecture of the museum site have been considered over the years, including the placement of a prominent magnolia garden from the 1930s. So, yeah, they decorated it, they built it up, they expanded it. Further expansions of the museum took place in 1977 and in 2011. And then in 2014, they tried to do one more expansion, but it was stopped. People in the residents in the area, the community, they were against it, so they held back. There's still plans to do more expansion, but I guess they have to deal with zoning and the community or whatever.
Yeah.
So about the collection. So this is the part where it kind of gives you an idea of what type of art. Yeah, what kind of art are we talking about? The Frick is one of the preeminent small art museums in the United States, with a high quality collection of old master paintings and fine furniture, and housed in 19 galleries of varying sizes within the former residence. Frick had intended the mansion to become a museum eventually, and a few of the paintings are still arranged according to his original layout. Besides its permanent collection, the Frick has always organized small, focused, temporary exhibitions. The collection features some of the best-known paintings by major European artists, as well as numerous works of sculpture and porcelain. It also has 18th century French furniture, blah, 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 blah. And basically, it talks about, a little more details they talk about is that the original pieces have pretty much stayed within the collection from his original collection.
Yeah.
But after the 1930s, the Frick collection grew. They continued to purchase more and add to the collection. Those pieces have traveled. So he's lent those, not him, but the collection has been lent out for other exhibits, but only the ones that were acquired afterwards. Some of the artists that are featured, Giovanni Bellini, Francois Bourgeois, John Constable. I'll name some of the people I know here. El Greco, Goya, Rembrandt, Renoir, Van Dyck. So a lot of the master painters. And I think this is why this, the Frick collection, this museum, is recommended for illustrators. If you're studying illustration or if you're studying representative painting, then a lot of times teachers will recommend go to the Frick collection, check out the masters there because of the specific types of works that are there. So as I've done in the other tours, I'm going to give you guys a little quick brief discussion of some of the pieces that stand out to me from the Frick collection. I have memories of it. Really, there's a little area that has these like Jesus pietas, like the Jesus coming off the cross, being removed from the cross, and in different styles of different time periods. And those I found really interesting, but I can't really call them out and say, the artist, I know the artist, or I know the name of the piece, other than a pieta. But some of the famous pieces that stayed in my head, I'll name right now. And I will start with, I think I should start with El Greco. So El Greco, he has a famous painting in there, Saint Jerome. It's a portrait of Saint Jerome. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the artist El Greco, but this piece, it says the year is 1609. It's oil on canvas. And a little brief description of this piece is the artist frequently returned to this subject, and here shows Jerome dressed as a cardinal in a pose reminiscent of his portrait of Cardinal Tavera, a portrait of Geronimo de Ceballos, pointing at an open book on a table covered with a green tapestry. The deep folds in the garment point to the influence of Michelangelo and Byzantine icon painting. Basically, what attracts me to this and what stayed in my head, this Saint Jerome piece by El Greco, is the style. El Greco always did like very exaggerated anatomy. Yeah. And this guy has a very long face, a long beard, heavy red cloak. It's not photorealistic. No. It's got expression and a style to it. But the seriousness of it, the stark background, the black background, when you see it in person, it's kind of, it grabs your attention. Yeah. So I always like that piece. So that's one. That's El Greco, Saint Jerome. And El Greco has, I think, two or three pieces in there. Another one in there, and this is a little more realistic and very impressive to look at in first person, is the portrait of Sir Thomas by Hans Holbein the Younger. This piece is, the year is 1527. It's oil on oak. This work was created during the period from 1526 when Holbein lived in London. He gained a friendship with the Dutch humanist Desiderius Erasmus, who recommended he befriended more than a powerful knighted speaker at the English. All right. Anyway, it's a portrait of a famous person. It's really impressive, the detail. If you want to see like oil painting that you would say is like a master photo real, very detailed painting in the style of Hans Holbein the Younger, like you really got to see these pieces. The colors of the red velvet, the charcoal, instead of using black, he made it look like charcoal, like almost black. The browns, the greens, the skin colors, the photorealism of the face, like this is really a masterpiece, and it's from 1527. So if you guys want to check out something, go check him out. Portrait of Sir Thomas.
Looks super nice, and then even the expression in his face.
Yeah,
it looks so real.
It's incredible. If you really want to study, realistic portraiture, like that's the one to study. That's really, really good stuff. Another one, just kind of running through these real quick, is the Rembrandt. There's a self-portrait by Rembrandt. It says here 1658 is the year, 1658, Rembrandt. It's a self-portrait. It says here, this is the largest of Rembrandt's many self-portraits, painted when he was 52 years old. The paint is applied thickly in rich layers with broken surfaces, highlights, and glazes that confirm how carefully thought out Rembrandt's rough manner was. So it's very thick and rough, the paint style and the texture.
Yeah.
But because of the glazes and everything, it shows that it was purposely done that way. And this was executed during a period of constraint and adversity at a time when Rembrandt had declared bankruptcy and was obligated to sell his vast collections.
Wow.
Enough about that. But the piece is amazing. If you want to see a Rembrandt in under one house with all these other masterworks, that's a really good place to check it out at the Frick.
Yeah.
I mean, if you don't know who Rembrandt is, then I don't know what to tell you. But he's one of the famous painters for portraits, and his painting style, he invented the painterly technique, what we call the painterly technique, which is that loose but photoreal look, that when you look up close, you see the strokes. So that's him. That's
Great
Rembrandt.
detail on it.
Yeah, it's incredible. Another one that is, if you're in New York and you live in New York, I don't know if you realize that you have a Johannes Vermeer painting right there in the Frick collection waiting for you to see it. But there's one called The Mistress and the Maid. Mistress and Maid, it's called. It's from 1667. Johannes Vermeer is known for that girl with the pearl earring piece that they made a movie out of and all that. But his paintings are controversial because people have said that he used photography or a version of photography from back in the day to be able to capture the lighting long enough for him to be able to copy it and paint it. His paintings are pretty small, so I think it's possible that really is true, and I've even seen documentaries where they explain how it was done. But he has this one painting, Mistress and Maid. It's interesting. I like it because of the actual, obviously the technique and the colors and all that, and the realism and the lighting. But I think it's the interaction between the two figures that I find it grabs me a lot. He has a few, I think he has like 2 or 3 paintings in the Frick. But this one is the one that stands out to me, Mistress and Maid.
The interaction between them, even though it looks like it might be a loose type of painting, it looks really nice how the expressions on their faces and the way that the other lady is sitting down, and like even though you cannot see the whole face, you can still see and feel their expressions.
Yeah, the subject says here, this oil on canvas portrays 2 women, a mistress and her maid, as they look over a mistress's love letter. So a little drama there.
Yeah.
In that story. And then I guess I'll just finish it up with this other one by Whistler. I don't know if some people know who Whistler is, but this one is Symphony in Flesh, Color, and Pink. Portrait of Mrs. Frances Leyland. For the wife of his chief patron of the 1870s, Whistler created an aesthetic masterpiece in which the subject and setting form one harmonious visual field. It's a really interesting portrait of this lady. It is Symphony in Flesh, Color, and Pink. I think it's all about the dress and the colors and all that. It makes it stand out. It stayed in my head. But all right, you guys, go check out this museum, the Frick Collection.
Pero si me estás haciendo todo igual, no tiene ningún color el paso que hace. Separa menos tiempo. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 y 10.
Culture Talk, Carla.
Yes, Culture Talk.
What do we have for Culture Talk?
So for this culture talk, I'm gonna be talking about rock en español or Latin rock.
All right, let's do it.
And I'm gonna give you guys a little bit of history about Latin rock, what it came from, and how it started. It is fair to say that Latin rock or rock en español is different than the rock that we talk about when we listen to English songs that are rock genres. So, for example, the rock en español or Latin rock is a little bit of every type of rock. You can hear punk rock, pop rock, Metálica, heavy rock, heavy metal, and it's an alternative rock, and it's all under the umbrella of rock or rock en español.
Right, rock en español. So I think I'm understanding what you're saying. So in English, there's rock and roll, there's heavy metal, there's alternative, there's all these different categories.
Yeah.
But rock en español is a subgenre of rock, and in that subgenre is mixed all these these versions of subgenres, all under the umbrella of rock en español.
Yeah.
Okay, got you.
So one of the first pioneers of the genre was Chicano rock artist Richie Valens.
La Bamba.
Yes, who adapted a Mexican folk song and fused it with rock melodies when he released it La Bamba in 1958. And because he was a Chicano, Mexico became one of the first countries to introduce the new wave of Latin American rockers.
Okay.
So that's pretty cool. I didn't thought that La Bamba was considered rock.
It's rock and roll.
Yeah, it's rock and roll. But I personally didn't know, so this was an interesting finding.
Oh, okay.
Then also the Beatles inspired many aspiring bands in countries such as Argentina, Spain, Peru, and Brazil. And in the United States, the guitarist Carlos Santana formed Santana, bringing to the forefront not only their music style but also the Chicano rock movement. Because when Santana started with his group, it was rock, but it was also that type of like rock and roll, and also to mix Latin sounds and congas and those like sounds that we recognize from our let's say rancheras and all that, to put it into a rock sound.
Well, I mean, Santana would, from what I know, I'm not an expert on him, from what I know of the music of him, I would say he mixed in also soul, a lot more soul, a lot more funk. The guitar soloing, the fact that he had these long extended guitar solos in his music, that's a genre in itself. He would, so many people compared him to like a Jimi Hendrix. That was the kind of rock that existed at that time. Yeah. But Santana took a little further when he mixed, like you said, the Latin influences and all these other influences into one. Maybe that was already happening from back then.
Exactly.
So he just continued. That makes total sense.
He made it popular. Yeah. So for people to know more that Chicano, Mexicano is making this type of music and rock. So in the 70s was when the genre was coined as Latin rock. That was also the same decade as when Santana came out. And during the same decade, Argentines Charly Garcia and Luis Alberto Spinetta were coming out with their own versions of rock. And they became the two key artists that formed the rock en español movement. So they, in Latin America, started the movement of rock en español and what it is.
And what was the name of their group?
So these two artists that are Charly Garcia and Luis Alberto Spinetta.
I never heard of him.
I've heard of Spinetta because of his writing. I've seen a lot of lyrics and people that quote him in different things. But his music I've never heard, which it should be interesting because I'm sure that he influenced the people that I'm gonna mention soon. That is like Soda Stereo and all this type of music groups. So experimenting with pop, new wave, heavy metal, and punk, the genre boomed in the 80s with the formation of bands such as Héroes del Silencio from Spain, Hombres G from Spain, Prisioneros from Chile, Soda Stereo from Argentina, Caifines from Mexico, and Enanitos Verdes from Argentina. Which Enanitos Verdes are like, everybody knows. If you want to say I know about rock en español, you will say, oh yeah, I know Enanitos Verdes and I know Lamento Boliviano, or I know Enanitos Verdes and I know Borracho y Loco.
Never heard of them.
Those are like anthems for like Spanish Latin rock and rock en español.
I really didn't hear of them, and I know that I've heard, now that you mentioned the title of the songs.
Yeah,
I heard it because you've played them.
Yeah.
But I really would never even know the name of the group or anything.
Yeah.
Or the name of the songs. But the Soda Stereo, I had heard them before.
Mm-hmm.
Los Caifanes?
Los Caifanes.
Yeah, I had heard the name of the group, but I never heard any of their music.
I mean, what is Soda Stereo? When I've heard their music, which I didn't know about their music until I met a guitarist from Colombia, but he was in Puerto Rico, and he showed me some of their music. When I heard it, I didn't thought that they were rock. I thought that they were more like, not pop, but like ballads,
right,
with a little bit of a different rhythm.
Yeah.
But not really rock.
Right.
So it's interesting to see also that this is like
considered rock. Right.
And these are the groups that made rock en español, famous and up there.
Right.
So rock en español began to get international notice towards the end of the 80s and early 90s, when bands such as the Aterciopelados from Colombia, Café Tacuba from Mexico, La Ley, I believe they're from Argentina, and Maná from Mexico came out to play. So Aterciopelados from Colombia, we played them before. We didn't play them, but we talked about them on another episode when we were talking about alternative music.
Yeah.
And they're considered rock en español too.
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely a fusion band, because they mix, their version of rock en español is mixing folk music with tangos, with ballads, with a little bit of cumbia, a little bit of of rumba, even a little bit. They have music that sounds like Santana,
even vallenatos.
Yeah, they mix in everything. And I mean, now they're on a different kind of kick, but that's one band that I would say, okay, yes, I did follow their music and get into it.
Yeah.
Maná, I had heard of.
Yeah.
And I've heard of their music all around. I never became a real fan of theirs, and we can talk about it later if we get to it, but something about their style just didn't hit me, and I think it's because it was derivative of music that I grew up with in English. So when I hear them, I'm always just hearing the English counterpart. Because they were probably inspired by bands that I knew of. But Maná, I have heard their songs. The other groups, not so much.
I have heard of La Ley. La Ley had a song that it was called, I think it was something Mentira. And that song also became kind of like an anthem. They had like an Unplugged MTV concert, and they had that song. They were playing that song, and it was amazing. And they had like two other songs that also became mainstream. So in Spanish or Latin countries, we knew about these songs. Maná became the representation of rock en español and Latin rock for Latin Americans. And now for Latinos in the United States, I think that Maná it's a name that everybody can recognize.
Maná right now is like the Rolling Stones.
Yeah.
Maná is like the biggest name when you talk about
rock en español.
Yeah.
Then Aterciopelados, I I started listening to them because you showed them to me. I didn't know about them before. And Café Tacuba, I knew like 1 or 2 songs. Yeah. But yeah, it's the same. These are names that they have one song that becomes mainstream, and that's how we know about the rest of the group. Yeah. And then I wanted to give a shout out to my Puerto Rican Latin rock bands, because we do have a movement of rock en español and Latin rock.
Never heard of any of them.
Yeah, in Puerto Rico. I know. Like, you might think it's just all trap, all reggaeton, but it's not. We do have different genres, and some of these bands are Black Guayaba, Circo, La Secta All Star, Viva Nativa, Fiel a la Vega, Millo Torres y El Tercer Planeta, Escapulario, and the one that really was in the forefront for Puerto Rican Latin rock or rock en español is Robbie Draco Rosa.
Okay.
Which he started in Menudo. He was with like Ricky Martin and those type of groups, and then he became a solo artist, and he came out with his own music. And when he came out with his own music, was this type of soul and rock and a fusion that you couldn't tell what was the genre.
Right.
But if we think about it, it is kind of like rock en español.
Or pop rock.
Or pop rock, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And then if we want to get into rock en español and maybe the quality of rock en español, now that I know a little bit more about rock in English, I get the influences that, let's say, groups like Maná have from bands from rock in English. Like, I know that I was watching this award show, the Latin Grammys. I was watching the Latin Grammys, and Maná had a special presentation. They played like 4 songs, and we were listening to the songs, and Cortes was like, oh yeah, this song is from The Police. Oh yeah, this song is from Sting. Oh yeah, this song is Nirvana. And I was like, how do you know? But the funny thing is that then they played another song, and I was like, oh yeah, this sound exactly like The Police. But I didn't know, because I didn't used to. The only rock that I will get, it was from rock en español. So let's say my first experience with the genre was in Spanish. So I didn't know what was the original song or where they got the influence from.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that's the thing. Like, I'm sure that the rock en español musicians are fans of the English bands that came before them. Mm-hmm. So they're probably taking chords and sounds and guitar licks from them. So it's recognizable to me. Like, I hear it, I'm like, yeah, I could hear it in there.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this: Where does Juanes fit in here? Because Juanes is a form of a rockero, even though he went more cumbia and pop.
Yeah, that's something in the article that I got my information from. They mention him as part of one of that are continuing that are continuing with the rock en español genre now in the 2000s.
But he's no longer rock en español.
But he's no longer.
He doesn't even play the guitar anymore.
Exactly. But when he had this song like Para tu amor or Nada valgo sin tu amor, those songs, they were really rock en español. So they consider him like as part of the movement, as well as Shakira. They mentioned Shakira. And
Shakira tried to be a rocker
when she started, and with like they mentioned one of her songs in her first album or second album, and this is like what, maybe 20 years ago already, but they still consider them part of the movement because they're helping to prolong the name of rock en español and Latin rock with their songs. They also mention Natalia Lafourcade, which I really don't think that she's part of rock en español, but they do mention her as one of the artists that are continuing with the genre at this time. So,
all right. Well, thank you for your information, Carla. I appreciate it. I gotta say, I like hearing some rock en español every once in a while. It's a nice break.
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess once American rock fizzled down, it kind of opens up, my ears to another version of rock. Mm-hmm. But then when you have American bands like, Queens of the Stone Age, or
I know,
they start coming in with their music. They start bringing them some really killer sounds. I'm like, oh.
And new sounds.
New sounds, yeah.
Because the thing with rock en español is that it's almost like they keep making tribute and giving tribute to these old bands.
Right.
So you keep listening to the old sounds, but then you have these old bands that comes out with new sounds. It's like, oh, okay. Yeah, that's the only thing. But listen to some rock en español. Open your ears.
You wanted me to teach you, right? This is street reality.
Hablando español, Carla, do you have any Spanish for me to learn? Because I need to learn some Spanish right now.
Yes, so how do you say collection?
Collection?
Yes.
Let me get my Hablando Español hat on. Collection is Colección.
Oh, yes.
That's an easy one.
Yes, that was easy. How do you say fortune?
Fortune? Fortuna.
Oh, look at you.
Carla, come on now.
Okay, how do you say residence?
What?
Residence.
Residence?
Yes.
Like where you live?
Yes.
Residencia?
Oh, okay.
Yeah?
Yes.
Residencia, okay.
How do
Residencia.
Yeah, Residencia. How do you say
Yes.
widow?
What?
Widow.
Widow?
Widow.
Widow. Widow is... That's a good one because it sounds nothing like it. Widow is Viuda.
Yes.
Viuda?
Viuda.
Viuda. All right. Got it.
How do you say industrialist?
Industrialist.
Industrialist.
Industrialist is... that's a tough one. Industrialist is like... that's like a businessman. Industrialista?
Yes.
No.
Industrialista.
Industrialista. Okay. Mm-hmm. That one I took a guess.
Well, good guess.
All right.
How do you say high quality?
High quality is Alta Calidad.
Yes.
All right.
How do you say, this is the last one I have, mansion?
Mansion is Mansión.
Yes.
So all your words minus one are the same, only a different pronunciation.
They are? Oh, well, yeah, they say use, yeah.
They're all the same as English, except a different pronunciation. Mm-hmm. All right, I got lucky. How about for you? I have. How do you say drums in Spanish?
Is it the batería?
Yes, batería. So there's drums like tambores.
Yeah.
But specifically drum kit, right? The drum kit of the rock band.
Batería.
Is batería. I don't understand why they call it batería though.
Me neither.
That throws me off.
Because it's like battery.
Yeah, it sounds like battery, like a rechargeable battery.
Yeah.
Yeah, that always throws me off. How do you say electric guitar? That's easy.
Guitarra electrónica.
¿No es eléctrica?
Guitarra eléctrica.
Guitarra eléctrica.
Oh my God, you see? I know.
You learned something, Carla. Is there a word for heavy metal? Or is it just...
Heavy metal. Metálica.
What?
Eso es lo que
le dicen
that's what
en
I've
español?
heard, yeah.
So heavy metal, they call it Metálica.
Yeah.
The Metálica is a band.
The name of the band.
That's interesting. That's pretty interesting.
That might be just me.
It might be just
Spoilers.
you. Yeah.
But
all right, yeah. So and how do you say? We were talking about the museum expanding. How do you say expansion?
Expansión.
Yeah, that was easy. How do you say will? The guy died, the guy from the Frick Collection.
This one is a good one.
And he died, and he left his will, and in his will, he asked them to turn his house into a museum.
Pay attention.
How do you say will, Carla?
You say like this. Testamento.
What?
Testamento.
Really? Testament. Your will and testament. Your last will and testament.
Yeah. Ese es tu testamento. Tienes que dejar un testamento.
Testamento. They say that in English, but now we just say will, but the whole
So the whole name is what?
Will and testament. Yeah.
Will and testament. Will and testament.
Yeah.
So both things, like
because it's kind
of
what
like you want and then what you let
stating.
What you
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, because the will is like what you want, your will,
wishes.
Your wishes, right?
And testament is because you're saying it out loud before you die.
You're making a formal statement of kind of like, I guess, I don't know, maybe I gotta look it up. There has to be a difference between will and testament, because a will to me sounds like it's something that you would want, right? Like what you want. But then a testament sounds like maybe has nothing to do with ownership, but more of not property, but like a testament could be like maybe that you're decreeing something to be done.
Right. Like maybe. Under my name,
do something.
I'm testifying that I want you guys to share my house and keep my microphones for a museum.
All right, quickly, how do you say museum?
Museo.
We've gone through this one a million times probably on this show. And how do you say, going back to the rock bands, how do you say rock band?
Banda de rock.
Banda de rock. All right. So it's not a rock. It's not a group. No es un grupo. Es una banda.
Yeah, una banda. Usually when it's about music, when it's a band, it's a banda, una banda.
All right. We've learned a lot of Spanish right now, Carla. Thank you so much. I feel so Spanish.
Thank you. I've learned a lot too.
I'm ready to listen to some rock en español.
Yes,
let's go to the Frick Collection with my headphones on.
En rock en español.
Y rockearla.
Dale.
All right, another episode done, Carla.
Yes.
Painless. Next episode will be episode 57. I think we're going to continue our museum tour. And I think next episode is going to be Thanksgiving.
Yes, it's going to be Thanksgiving.
We got to be making our plans already this week. You guys out there listening to this, make your plans. Get your food together. Go to the supermarket before all the turkey's gone.
And cranberries.
All right. Catch you guys next time.